I'm going to ask Tom if he would lead us in a word of prayer to begin.
Our dear Heavenly Father, Almighty God, so very thankful for all your many wonderful blessings. Thankful for this time that we can have this class, that we can look into the history and look into your word to see how the Israelites and how they dealt with your law and then going into the promised land, and how Moses dealt with the Israelites. Help us to learn lessons from this and how we can apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah. Okay, before I actually get into the class, I let everybody know that I have shingles, a pretty bad case of it. So I'm not going to be shaking hands or hugging anybody, just as a special precaution. And then after services, if you will, just open up the middle of the aisle and give me a chance to get out. But
what about kissing?
huh?
What about kissing?
Thanks, Joe. I mean, I didn't think about that. Okay, as Tom indicated in his prayer, we have been learning about how God dealt with not only his people, but before the law of Moses came into being, how he dealt with men from creation to the time that Moses was given the law at Mount Sinai. And we have had a lot of repetition, which is good because it's good to be reminded of things. It's easy to forget certain things, important things. So tonight, we're basically going to just not go one by one after another, but look at the curses that was pronounced by God and the blessings to be received, and what Moses said to them at the conclusion of those things being pronounced. So we're going to look at Mount Gizrim and Mount Ebal. The city of Shechem was down there in the valley, and so God chose those 6 men to speak from Mount Gizrim, and what was said. What was that blessings or cursings, Gene?
Blessings.
Yeah, those are blessings. Then Mount Ebal was Reuben and these other 5, and obviously they took care of pronouncing the curses. And it's kind of interesting to me that they begin with the curses first. So I think maybe, to my way of thinking, I was thinking that, maybe God wanted them to be sure to know how important it is for them to obey his law and his will. Okay? So just looking at those that were pronounced, I looked at that first one as far as one who is going to be cursed, one who makes an idol and sets it up in secret. Do you think that there's anything particularly important about the fact that he says that sets it up in secret? That's kind of an addition to what is usually said, that, that God, you shall not commit, you shall not make any idols and that sort of thing. Why do you think that it says that whoever does it, they're setting it up in secret? Any guys, any thoughts about that? I'm sorry? Okay, they're trying to hide whatever kind of idol that they have made. And it's possible, of course, to do things in secret that the people around you are not aware of it, but you can't hide things from God. They seem to have forgotten that. And we recognize that God's people really struggled. They struggled throughout the whole thing. as far as their deliverance from Egyptian bondage, all the way through their possession of the promised land. They failed to do what God told them to do, and it caused them to just get further and further away from God through idolatrous worship and whatever, to where it got to the point that God said, well, that's enough. I'm going to have to really bring things to your mind about how bad things are that you're doing, you know, and that sort of thing. So maybe that was the idea that, well, God perhaps won't see this, and then I can, you know, I'll do it in my tent or whatever, and nobody will know, and no harm done. Gene?
Well, sometimes too, if they wanted to worship an idol, they know they might think the people around them would disapprove.
Yeah.
They wanted to still have a part in all the activities of the worship at the temple and.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be,
and
yeah.
So if people knew they were idol worshipers, they thought they might be left out of that.
Yeah, okay. All right, the next one is, and we're not going to do every one of them, but the next one is who fails to honor father and mother. Why is that such a no-no? What has God said about honoring your mother and your father? Tom?
My understanding of it is that basically the other thing is you can't respect your parents, how can you respect God?
Well, that's true.
That's my understanding of it. And also there's also done respect and honor. I can't really think of anything else offhand.
Okay. Now, when God gave the commandment, the Ten Commandments, about honor your father and your mother, and it was repeated a couple of times, what came after that? Honor your father and your mother,
So that you would be able to live long in the land.
yeah. It had to do with other promises that God had made. It was important for them to recognize that your proper respect, as Tim said, for your father and your mother is so important that I am saying that it can determine whether or not you're going to live a long time in the land that you're going to be getting, Gene.
Well, one of the first things that happened in the New Testament that Jesus condemned the Jews of his time for was Corbin, which was their way of not honoring father and mother by saying, I've given whatever you could have benefited to God. And so, and he condemned them for it. The Jews of his day had not done it.
So we've got 3 or 4. One who removes landmark. We've talked about that many times about why that's so important. And why would anybody move somebody else's landmark? Yes, ma'am.
To take their property, or to
Okay.
increase their property.
Okay, Tom. That's it. You know, I think that it's a matter of greed, isn't it not? That they want more, you know, that they see somebody else's property, maybe they think it's better than what they got, and greed fills their heart, that perhaps they will work out some kind of a situation to get the other person's. You know, covetousness is condemned by the Apostle Paul in Colossians chapter 3, verse 5, that covetousness, he says, is idolatry. So obviously God is trying to establish something that is extremely important by making it aware in 2 different ways here. And then leads the blind off his path, one who robs weak and defenseless of justice. So you've got those that are mistreatment of your fellow man, obviously, but then once again, one who lies to father and mother. So he says, first of all, one who fails to honor the father and mother, and now one who lies to father and mother. In the New Testament, can you remember what the Bible says in regard to the penalty for someone who lies? It's in the book of Revelation. Almost at the end of the book of Revelation. Yes, ma'am.
The lake of fire is from?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole list of people, of things that will cause one to suffer eternal damnation in the lake of fire and brimstone. But it's interesting to me that in that category, or in that group of things, was liars. All liars. It says all liars. I think that it would be very difficult for us to be able to say, well, I've never lied, because it's very easy to do that. But God places a premium on integrity and that sort of thing. So that was one of the next three, lying with any kind of animal, lies with his sister or stepsister, who lies with his mother-in-law. Those are all sexual sins that he was trying to keep people from doing. One who strikes his neighbor, and again, it's in secret. God's going to see it. Maybe nobody else does, but God's going to see it. And what kind of heart do you have that you would hit your neighbor rather than honoring your neighbor and loving your neighbor as yourself? One who takes a bribe to kill an innocent person, and one who does not uphold the words of the law. Now, the question that I have concerning these different curses that God is pronouncing here is, why? Was all of those things a problem with those people at that time? I mean, if that wasn't anything that was going on, then giving them these laws wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, would it? Well, I never done that, I never done that, and whatever. So it seems to me like that, why is an interesting question. Anybody got any ideas in regard to that? Why he gave these specific laws, these curses here, as opposed to others?
I think it's twofold. One is those were things that have been done.
Okay.
But at the same time, these are the things that eventually causes Israel to go into captivity. Because all of these things were going on in the land, and God drove them out of the land.
Yeah. They've had trouble with idol worship and that sort of thing. There has been instructions concerning helping the weak persons, the widows and orphans, and all that sort of thing. So obviously these things have to do with stuff that they have been guilty of. Danielle?
Well, I think it's just like we do with our kids. We remind them about everything, or we're supposed to, before we come into a place or somewhere where we expect them to behave in a certain way. And if they don't behave, and we haven't given them the front loading, the warnings about what would happen if they don't do what we would like them to do, then we can't blame them for doing whatever they want, because they have no idea.
Yeah.
So God is preparing them, he's telling them, and he's telling them the why, because he's, saying if you do these kind of things, this is what will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and a good point. If you've been informed ahead of time, then what you're doing when you go ahead and commit it is willful and rebellion against God and his law. We have that problem today, don't we? In our nation, there's just a lot of stuff that's going on in our nation today that are contrary to the will of God. Brother Lopez.
I think we can relate all of these laws into what was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think that was to prevent for this to happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason why there were three different things that he had to say about sexual sins, because they were. I mean, they were doing these things. And he needed to make sure that they understood. I'm not going to stop you from doing them, but this is going to be the consequences of that. And those curses that have been pronounced, well, those are pretty severe. And those are things that nobody who is right thinking would want to be doing. Okay, but let's look at the potential blessings, and it's interesting because the list of the blessings for faithfulness is a much more extensive list than the curses. Why do you think that is true? Why did God give this long list of blessings? And they're incredible when you think about it. Why did he give these long list of blessings and a shorter list of the curses? Any thoughts about that? Tom?
God rather bless his followers than curse them.
Absolutely. You know, the scriptures teach us that God rejoices in doing good and in our doing good. And he does not take any kind of pleasure in any kind of disciplinary action that he has to take. You know, that's one of the things that people in the world that know nothing about the scriptures, that's one of the things that they have trouble with, you know, because they always see anything of a negative nature as God doing that and hurting people and all that sort of thing. When in fact that God, all he wants to do is things for our good. And so look at this lesson, you know, this list here. They're going to be blessed in the city and in the country. You know, you're in the town. You're going to have a very blessed life. If you're outside in the country someplace, same thing. God will bless you. You will be blessed. The offspring of your body. How come that's so important to the ladies of that time? That you will be blessed concerning the offspring of your body. Tom?
Back in the day, especially around then, when it came to births and everything, it was common for kids to die while being birthed, other things, mother dying due to the lack of proper medical care that we have today.
Okay.
That's my thing.
What else? Annie?
Well, for a woman in this time, that was all important, because if you could not have children, you were looked upon as being cursed.
Yep. Yeah. And if you didn't have any children, you certainly could be the way that God brings the Messiah into the world. So God tells them, listen, if you just, when you go into the promised land, if you just, you know, do what I tell you to do, then look at all these things that you know, he says the ground is going to produce. You know, your crops are going to be big and whatever. Who was a pillar of the ground but sinned and God cursed him for that?
Cain.
Yeah. You know, God came and asked him, where's your brother? And he, well, if I'm a brother's keeper, and God said, well, his blood is talking or calling to me from the ground. And he tells him there are several things that he's going to do as far as punishment. And he says, you know, the ground is no longer going to yield its strength to you. You can plant all you want to, and you might get a crop, but it's going to be kind of a scrawny thing. It's not going to be like you were. They're going into this promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, that's going to have all kinds of wonderful plants and trees and stuff like that. So this is a wonderful, blessing. You're going to plant your seed, and you're going to get this huge crop as a result of that. The offspring of your beast, and the increase of your herd, the young of your flock, your kneading basket and kneading bowl, all of those things. Your flocks are going to increase significantly, because I'm going to make sure that they are successful in their offspring, giving of their offsprings, and you know, it's important that they increase their herd. That's food and that sort of thing. So concerning the blessing of the basket and the kneading bowl, you know, it's always going to be full. You're always going to have food. When you come in and go out, what does that mean? You come in and you go out. I do, Danielle?
You'll be safe when you journey.
Okay, and that's very important at this time. You'll be safe on your journey. You don't have to worry about your enemies or whatever, even your home folk that might be mad at you and that sort of thing. But whatever you go out to do, it's going to be successful. Whatever you do staying at home, that's going to be successful. You're just going to be blessed no matter where you are and what you're doing, okay? And your enemies will be defeated. Kind of along the same line of being blessed as you go in, come in and go out. Your enemies will be defeated. What was the first battle that they had when they crossed the Jordan River? What was the very first battle, Dale?
Jericho.
Yeah, it was Jericho. And they were certainly successful there with just a certain number of soldiers. But then the next battle, what was the next battle? Joel?
Ai.
At Ai. And they had already spied that out, checked it out, and the report was that, well, it's small, we don't even need to send the whole army. They just send a small portion, 3,000, and they were defeated because there was sin in the camp. God's blessings are based upon or predicated upon obedience. There was a man by the name of Achan who saw an idol and he liked it and he kept it and he hid it in his tent and that sort of thing. But God spoke to Joshua and told him, listen, you got sin in your camp. Joshua had thrown himself on the ground in very heartache, kind of thing. And God told him, said, get up, there's sin in the camp. So God says, your enemies will be defeated if, that's basically the big word, if you obey. The Lord will bless your barns and all that you put your hand to do. It's just amazing. I mean, look at these blessings that God is pronouncing upon them. The peoples of the earth will be afraid of you. And what was the first example of that when they went into the promised land? The people being afraid of them. Who was afraid of them? Joe?
Well, you talking about when they sent the spies in?
Yeah.
And the spies had already seen or heard of these couple million people, and little did they know that the Canaanites were afraid of them.
Yeah. We sing the song about Joshua and the walls came tumbling down. I think that what God does in that record, telling us about the walls falling down, this was a really great fortified city, that it would be very difficult to be successful overtaking that city. But Ahab bolstered their confidence concerning that by telling them, well, our hearts melted when they heard you coming, that you were coming. So God kept his promise there. That he said, you'll abound in your prosperity, your offspring of your body and your cattle will be blessed with success there. Again, the produce of the ground. So God is promising them some magnificent promises that they should be very, very thoughtful about and grateful that, as a matter of fact, we'll see it here in just a moment in regard to what we have read early in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, let's move on, and I apologize that I don't have a whole lot of zip to me tonight. And probably I'm not presenting this material in a very good way, but please bear with me. Okay, so if you disobey, the Lord will send curses, confusion, and rebuke in all you do. And you will be destroyed because of your evil deeds. Oh man. That should get their attention very quickly when he is telling them, well, the problem is if you disobey me, you're not going to see these wonderful blessings. As a matter of fact, it's going to be the very opposite. There's pestilence, consumption, fever, inflammation, fiery heat, drought, blight. Those don't sound good. None of that sounds too good. So, and not only that, you know, God promised them that your ground is going to produce abundant crops. And said, and unless if you disobey, God says, well, I'm not going to send you any rain. I'm not going to send you the nourishing rain that is necessary for your crops to grow and yield plenty. So the ground will not produce. And your enemies will defeat you. Your carcasses, food for birds and beasts. You know, that just really doesn't sound very good. The Lord will smite you with blindness and madness and blindness and bewilderment. You just don't know what to do. You can't figure out what's the next move. You'll be oppressed and robbed with none to help you. Well, what is so bad about that? This business of none to help you. What is God saying to them there?
No protection.
Yeah, no protection. Anything? What else? There's nobody to help you, Gene.
Well, I think he said, I'm not gonna help.
That's my take on it. Is not only are your neighbors and friends or family members, nobody's going to help you, but I ain't going to help you either. You can't come to me and look for help because I'm not going to give it to you because you're not obeying me. I've given you a law and I have given you this huge list of blessings. So if you are not going to pay any attention to that, and if you're going to go ahead and willfully disobey me, then you're all always on your own, you know. Several years ago in Chicago, some atheists paid to have some signs put on the buses of Chicago, and it was just a simple message on that. I don't believe in God, and I'm doing just fine. Well, that's basically what God is saying. You ain't going to do, you know, you're not going to do just fine without me. I'm blessing you. I mean, every single one of us have been richly blessed today, yesterday, the day before that. You know, I don't think that people, even members of the church, I don't think that people really understand what it would be like without God. Well, what is it to be without God? Where is it that you can go and be completely without God? Well, that would be hell. That's hell. That's what hell is. That's the reason why hell is such torture and torment and hopelessness, because you're without any of the things that God gives us every day. We wake up, you know, you look outside, it's a beautiful sunshiny day, beautiful clouds in the sky, the trees and the flowers and all that sort of thing, and you're able to breathe and get a breath. All of those things that we pretty much take for granted to a large extent, those are things from God. If he says, well, I'm not going to be with you, then all of that's gone. Gene, do you have a comment?
Well, I was gonna say, a lot of times, the nation is being blessed if there's enough righteousness there for God to bless it. So people that are not righteous are benefiting from the blessings God is giving in general to a nation that he is still working with and trying to, you know, and there's enough people that are trying to serve him, that he will bless everyone for their sake.
Okay.
I think a lot of times people don't realize that. They just assume, well, I'm doing all kinds of bad things and nothing's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be nothing's happening to you because God's blessing the nation for his own purposes.
Okay, excellent point. He says that you will build a house but not live in it. And you'll plant a vineyard and not eat its fruit. What does that remind you of? You're going to build a house, but you don't get to live in it. You plant vineyards and so forth, and you don't get to eat that.
Taken into captivity.
Okay, that happened when they were taken into captivity.
It reminds me of what we just studied, the other day about, who should be fighting in the army. That if you have a house, that you built a house. So it basically what he's saying is, you're going to have war, and you're gonna have to leave what you did in order to fight in the war.
Yeah. Oh, Tim?
Yeah, it's also, it's the opposite of what he's promised them coming into the land. When they come into the land, they're gonna go live in houses they didn't build. They're gonna go get the harvest that they didn't plant. And really, a lot of the things on the list are undoing the blessings that God has given them in the first place.
Absolutely. Somebody turn for me to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. And who has it? Okay, Pam. Would you begin
Deuteronomy
reading?
chapters 10 through 13? Chapter
No,
6.
I'd like for you to start in verse 4,
Okay.
and then down to verse 13.
Okay. Hear, O Israel, the Lord of your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words I command you today, these shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk to them when you are sitting in your house, and when you walk by the way, and you lie down, and when you rise. You should bind them with a sign on your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes. You shall write those on the doorposts of your house and your gates. And when the Lord God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you the great and good cities that you did not build, houses filled with good things that you did not fill, cisterns that you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant, when you shall eat and are full. Then take care, at least you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God that shall fear. Him you shall serve, by his name you shall swear.
Okay? The first part of that reading is, parents, you got an important job, and that is to make sure that your children know your history, to know about the deliverance of your forefathers from Egypt. And that's very important, because that would be reminding them that how wonderful and powerful the God that they're supposed to be serving is, and then how important it is for the parents to make sure that the children growing up are aware of that and aware of all the blessings that they have received over the years. But then he goes and he tells them, and so when I'm going to be with you. And when you come into the promised land, you're going to, and Tim mentioned this a moment ago, the opposite of it, but you're going to live in houses that you didn't build. And not only that, it's going to be furnished, you know. You're going to plant vineyards, and it's going to abundant crops and that sort of thing. So he tells them, Moses told them very early in this discussion of what's going to be happening and the importance of them following after God's will. Because if you're not going to do that, then these things you're not going to receive. You're not going to be recipient of these things. The sons and daughters will be taken captive. I just can't imagine what that would be like. I just, if Amber and Meredith, when they were younger, or even now, somehow they were taken, and we don't know where either of them are. I really don't know how parents deal with that. And he says that down there, others will eat your crops, and you will be driven mad by what you see. And you and your king will be taken by another alien, or another nation, and you will serve other gods. Do they have a king yet? No. Not an earthly king. God is their king. And when you get over to 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the people come to Samuel and tell him that we want a king, then God gives them what they want. But he says your king will be taken by another nation, and you will serve other gods, even though you're commanded not to engage in idol worship. You will plant a harvest, vineyards, but not drink, olive trees, but no oil will come from it. You will not enjoy that. And the aliens among you will rise while you will sink lower. You will be the tail. What does that mean? You will be the tail. What's so bad about that? I'm so? What?
No man of the totem pole.
Okay,
You amount
yeah.
to nothing.
Yeah, rather than being in a situation where you are superior as far as your might and everything. Okay. I think I got these things out of. Okay. This what Moses is doing here is kind of a renewing of the covenant that God had made with them at Mount Sinai. And the thing that is so much different now is that God is being much more specific than the things that he said at Mount Sinai. And this particular covenant is more about Israel keeping the land when they come into the promised land. He's telling them all these things that have to do with them coming into the land as he promised them and being able to stay there. He's going to defeat their enemies. He's going to do everything that he can without interfering with their own free will to make this a wonderful place, just like he promised them. So it has to do with them keeping their land. But he says, if you're unfaithful, you'll be driven from the land. So it just is building up to what Moses says toward the last. Moses reminds them of their history that began in Egypt. We've talked about so many times, so we're not really going to take a long time to look at that. Let me make sure that, yeah. What did Moses, I'm getting ahead of myself there a little bit. God, in all these times, why, when they come in and they disobey God and things don't go well with them, and he says, there's going to be your enemies, and they're going to be wondering and asking, why has Jehovah done such a thing to this land? And the answer is because they turned their back on their God and forsook the covenant made by him. What does that mean to you? What's the significance of what we just read there? Why has Jehovah done such a thing to this land? Well, because they turned their backs on their God and forsook the covenant made with him. Any thoughts about that, Tim?
I mean, he's emphasizing that the covenant is a two-sided thing, and he's giving them the land. They're entering into this covenant now as he's giving them the land, and that's his part of it, is he's giving them the land. It's a good land and all these things. But if they don't keep their part of it, they're going to lose the land, and everything that he's done for them will be undone if they don't keep their part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So he is trying his best to warn them about the significance. I mean, how important is it that you do what I tell you? And they had the covenant written, I mean, the law of Moses was written out for them. So, gives us a good thought in regard to, we've got this book we call the Bible, and everything we need to know is in it. So how much do we use it? You know, how much time do we spend learning about God? Okay, so we're going to move on. So, yeah. Was God justified in his treatment of his people? I'm sorry?
Now?
Anytime. But this one primarily, since we're studying about Israel, was he justified in the way that he treated them, Mario?
Yes.
Why?
He's God.
Yeah, that's as good an answer as there is.
He's just, he's fair. He cleared the land out for them because of the wickedness of the Canaanites. He put them in there, and they're going to turn back around and engage in that same wickedness?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kevin?
You know, when you make an agreement with God, if he's gonna keep his part, you're supposed to keep your part. That's all part of making an agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to me why people always say, well, I don't want to serve a God that sends people to hell. Well, the fact of the matter is, God has never sent anybody to hell, and never will. That's a choice that we make, Tim.
Yeah, and to what you're saying there, at the end of chapter 30, and, you know, kind of rush through it there, but at the end of chapter 30, he's talking about the fact that all these laws and everything that he set before him, and he says, I've set before you life and death,
Yes.
So choose life. So when, again, all of this has been set before them from the start, from the beginning. They know the rules, so to speak. So, and they know the consequences. So when death comes upon them, it's because they chose it.
Yeah.
I mean, God is the one who's going to send it, but it's because they made the choice.
Yeah. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 3 tells us that everything that God does in regard to our relationship, including the punishment for doing evil, he says he's just. He's the justifier of the people, but he is just in his dealings with it. Being just means that he's doing the right thing. I just sometimes, when somebody I'm talking with is going on and on and on about how hard it is to do the will of God, you know, so that you feel like that you're in a good relationship with God, or these things that God is requiring of me, I don't understand why it has to be so hard and that sort of thing. And my normal response is, well, it wasn't very hard, or it was very hard for Jesus to go to the cross. And you're not being asked to do anything that even remotely is akin to that. And that's one of the things I think that we need to to remember. The last thought that I'd like to, because millennialism, if you are familiar with it at all, that's very dominant in the religious world today. And it's the reason why our nation is involved and gets involved with what's going on in Israel and such, is because there is a belief by many in the religious world that if you don't do anything that you can to help God's people, then you're going to have to suffer some significant consequences at the end, so to speak. But there's a very, very interesting verse in Joshua chapter 21 and verse 45. If somebody get that real quick? Joshua 21, verse 45. We'll be getting to that pretty soon in the next quarter. But as Tim brought out, you know, God set before them, or Moses set before them life and death, and he told them, just choose life. Go ahead.
Joshua 21:45. Not one of the good promises which the Lord has made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass.
All came to pass. Not one promise that God made has failed at that time. That's one of the reasons why there are religious folks that believe that we've got to take such good care of Israel now, is because there are promises that God hadn't kept, and we've got to help get those promises made, especially the land promise and that sort of thing. So these things that the scriptures and what we're talking about, they're very, very important to us, because we need to be concerned about what's going on in our nation. And we need to recognize the dangers that can be as far as our relationship with God. Calvin, very quickly.
My main respect for Israel is that they brought the oracles of God. They had the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. But here's the deal. You reject Christ, you got a problem.
Yes.
You got a big problem.
Yeah.
And so, rejecting Christ or accepting Christ takes precedence over that. Not that God still doesn't have these certain promises towards them, but you can't go beyond Jesus Christ.
Yes. Absolutely. Very good. Thank you all. And again, I'm sorry that I don't have a whole lot of energy tonight, but I do appreciate the participation by the class. And Sunday, we'll finish up Deuteronomy, right?
Yes.
Yes. Sunday, we'll finish up Deuteronomy, and next Wednesday, you'll have a new teacher that's going to take you into the land, promised land.